Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. We're ready for the event.
Birch Aquarium, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Brooke Martell at the Birch Aquarium. How do you hear me?
I have you loud and clear, Birch Aquarium. How do you hear us? Welcome to the International Space Station.
We are so excited to speaking with both of you. Jessica Meir, Chris Williams, thank you so much for taking the time. Lots of phones up recording, lots of applause. Let's get started here with your first question, because we are here at Birch Aquarium, which, Jessica, I know you're familiar with. We'd love to kick it off with an ocean question for each of you. What is your favorite ocean animal?
That's a tough question, but it's one I have a couple of canned answers for because, of course, at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, I studied two main animals for my PhD, and those were the emperor penguin and also the northern elephant seal. So I'm kind of biased to those two. But I also love all marine creatures, so I get very excited when I scuba dive. And one of the things that has always fascinated me is a creature that you have housed at the Birch Aquarium, which is very rare, and those are leafy sea dragons. So hopefully those leafy sea dragons are still doing well at the Birch Aquarium.
That's a hard question. I have a hard time picking out one favorite. I would say I've always thought blue whales are really cool. I also really like coelacanths, just because they've been here since prehistoric times. I think that's really, really interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we have this next question. This one is a two-parter. It comes from Tammy and Juliana. They asked if they wanted to become an astronaut today, what are some skills and qualities they would need, and what should they be studying in school?
Thanks for the awesome question. I think the really cool thing about being an astronaut today is that there's not one path to get here. So, what should you study? Well, the main thing you should study is something that you love and that you're passionate about. You need some skills in science, technology, engineering, and math, but the people that do really well as astronauts are the people that are really passionate about something and that drives them to excel. The other really important thing is being a good teammate. We are incredibly fortunate to be part of a huge team that works together, and being a successful astronaut is all about working together and making the best out of each other as we work together.
And Jonathan wants to know, what surprised you about your journey to the International Space Station?
We spend years preparing for our missions, so there are a few things that really surprise us from the technical standpoint. We receive so much training on all of the hardware, all of the things that we'll be doing, like our spacesuits, the experimental hardware, how to fix the toilet. The thing that surprises you when you get up here, because there's not really a way to prepare for it, is just what it's like to live and work in microgravity. You can talk to other astronauts, they can give you some tips and tricks, but everyone experiences it differently, and you really can't prepare your brain for the fact that everything floats, that you can just spin around like this, that when you put something down, it has to be Velcroed to something or you'll lose it. You can't just, on Earth, we kind of just set things down on the table or on the floor and they stay there. Here, if you set something down, you got to make sure it's attached with Velcro, and then who knows, is it up here, was it down here, was it on this side? It's very easy to lose things. So I think that's one of the things that it's not necessarily a surprise, but it's just totally novel, and so it's kind of a whole surprise for your entire body and your brain and adapting to living in microgravity.
And we'd like to hear both of your answers on this one. I think a lot of people might be wondering. Anna asked, were you scared to fly in space?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think like getting on a rocket and launching, everybody says, oh, that's got to be a scary experience. But we train so hard for that experience that, when you're sitting on top of the rocket, at least for me, it felt like I was in a simulation. I felt like I was seeing the displays, seeing the switches that I was used to. And maybe it was a little bit louder and there were a few different, G-force sensations. But, you've run through that so many times. I think the bigger challenge or the bigger thing that was tough for me is just being away from my family for such a long period of time. I have young kids and just, being worried about how they're growing up so fast while I'm up here on the space station. I think that's been the biggest challenge.
And I think I feel pretty much the same as Chris. I think it's more difficult for our family and friends and loved ones to watch us launch. They're a little bit more scared because they don't really understand everything. They aren't as familiar with it as we are when we are really very intimate with all the details and functions that will be happening. The one fear that I think that most astronauts have all the way through from launch until landing is the fear of making a mistake. You have so much responsibility on your shoulders. You're conducting work for all of these scientists and technicians and experts on the ground, and it's all really in your hands as the operator. So that's the one thing is we just really want to make sure that we don't let anyone down and we don't make a mistake for everybody that's supporting us.
This next question comes from Emily. What type of biology experiments do you perform on the ISS, and what's the coolest one?
As a biologist, it's hard to pick just one because we do a whole realm of biology and physiology and medical experiments. So I'll just name a couple that we're working on right now. One that Chris and I were really excited about, both of us. We've both been working on a veggie experiment. On my first mission, we grew Mizuna lettuce in the veggie facility, which was so nice to have something green and alive and growing that we were watering and taking care of. And at the end of it, we actually got to eat a fresh salad. So that was a huge highlight. Recently, we've planted some alfalfa in the veggie facility. And unfortunately, we don't get to eat this one. But the other day, I was watering it, and it was so nice. As soon as I lowered this area to reach to water in, I got bombarded by this scent, the smell of life. And that's something that we never have up here in the sterile environment of the space station. So it's really nice. As a physiologist, we have a lot of different physiology experiments that I get very excited about. We use the ultrasound to look at blood flow in our different blood vessels to see what changes are happening because some astronauts recently have been found to have some clots formed on their missions. And of course, that's something we want to make sure we monitor and learn how to prevent and treat so that we don't cause any serious medical problems. And I'll let Chris wrap up by telling you, this isn't just a cool headband that he's wearing. He is actually part of a really cool experiment called Cypher, and he is wearing all of this biomonitoring equipment right now.
Yeah, this isn't just for style, as Jessica was saying. This is actually has a sensor in it measuring my O2 saturation and blood pressure. And I have a whole suite of sensors on right now that I'm wearing for the next couple days to help basically track how my vital signs change. And I wore this at the beginning of my mission, in the middle, at the end. And this, in addition to a bunch of other studies where we look at things like vestibular adaptation, will help us understand better how the stimulus of spaceflight affects the human body. So it's a really neat way that we can ourselves contribute to science in addition to helping to perform experiments to also be the subject of them.
And Jody wants to know, why is it important for people to care about space and science research?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple really good answers to that. I think one of them is that the research we do in space is pretty unique. As scientists, the way we try to approach problems is we try to break down and isolate different variables and how they affect systems. And in space, we can get away from the impact of gravity, and that has huge impacts in a variety of different things, not just on the human body like we were just talking about, but also in basic physics and looking at things like how crystals grow or how proteins form. And so by coming to space, we can do research that can really help us understand how things fundamentally work by taking out this one variable of gravity that is always there on Earth. I think spaceflight also is really important because it represents exploration and pushing the boundaries and frontiers. And the more we explore up here and the more we go up here, the more questions that we didn't even know to ask we can start to ask. Things about not only about sort of basic science, but also about how our planet formed, and as we go on towards the moon and Mars, how our solar system formed, and understanding those things as well.
And this next question comes from Theodora, and she asked, I know Jessica spent time scuba diving while at Scripps, and she's wondering, as a fellow scientific diver at Scripps, is scuba diving at all similar to spacewalking? How are they similar and different in practice?
You know, there are a lot of similarities between scuba diving, especially technical diving like scientific diving, and what we do up here for spacewalks. I remember when I was at Scripps going through the scientific diving program, I actually had already done some similar training, so I was there mostly to learn how to use a dry suit. I had never worn a dry suit before, and I was getting ready to do that in the Antarctic for studying the emperor penguins. And those first dives in a dry suit were right here at the Scripps Pier, and I'll always remember those. But some of the things that we do, for example, diving under the ice in the Antarctic, you always have your down line that you return to. Some people use, in different types of diving, people use different types of tether systems. We always want to make sure that we rely and trust and inspect our equipment 100%. You have to understand your equipment. You have to know how it works. You have to know how to inspect it and rely on it. And that's something that we do here as astronauts every day. When you're scuba diving, you have this life support system with your tanks and your regulator. When we're spacewalking, we have pretty much the same thing. It's called a PLIS, and it has our oxygen in the back. It has a CO2 scrubbing system. And so we understand how to use this hardware because we've trained in it a lot, and to recognize any signs if there are any problems. And we have some kind of memorized protocols and responses, just like you would for technical diving, so that you can enact this kind of safety protocol when you're in a challenging environment. So there are a lot of different things that apply to working with like technical equipment and systems. And honestly, I think some of that technical scuba diving that I did in the Antarctic actually helped me get this job, because I was able to speak about those types of things already from my previous experience, and that helped them understand, okay, she gets it. You know, maybe she'll be able to operate in this environment well and rely on her hardware and learn these complex new things. And I think that really helped me along the way.
Caesar asked, what are some things you enjoy doing in your spare time when you are up in space?
For me, I think my all-time favorite thing to do in my spare time is to look out the window. We have this wonderful cupola module that has basically a full hemisphere of windows that you can look down on the Earth. And we orbit the Earth 16 times a day. And so, you know, during our workday at any point, it might be night, it might be the daytime, and you could be over anywhere on the Earth. And so just floating up to the window, taking a look out and trying to take some pictures is my favorite pastime for sure.
Leslie wants you to explain what it's like looking back at Earth from space, and what is your favorite or most interesting view of Earth from the ISS?
Well, like Chris said, you can always find somebody in our free time in the cupola or at some of our other windows, because the view that we have is simply remarkable and extraordinary, and unlike no other perspective that you ever have when you're on the Earth. I think for me, you know, it fills me with this kind of awe and fascination. Of course, being a grad student at Scripps, I always was an avid environmentalist, and I understood so much about how important it was to protect our Earth, our planet, our atmosphere, our oceans. But I think that resonates even more loudly when you have this distinct privilege of looking down at the Earth from above. You have this feeling, you're filled with this immense feeling of how special, how fragile it is, that we need to protect it, and also how insignificant we truly are as humans when you look down at this one orb in all of its beauty, in the scale of the cosmos and the black void of space around it. You also see how interconnected everything is. You see these land masses, you see these continuous oceans, and you realize that we as humans, even though we often point out our differences, and those cause us problems on the Earth, whether it's at a personal or at a national or at a worldwide level. But you realize when you look down from above that we truly are one, that we are all in this together on this one shared home planet. So that is a perspective that I wish that we could share with all the eyes of all of the humans. And in picking just one favorite view, it's really difficult, because what I see, the beauty is so varied. You have this incredible incredible palette of textures and colors that I didn't even know. I had no idea before my first mission that there were so many different types of sand dunes, different colors, different textures, different shapes, and how they form. They're astoundingly beautiful in Africa and throughout the Middle East. The swirling currents that are always around the edges of the continents, right around Southern California where you are, you see these different colors. It looks like a watercolor, like somebody spilled some watercolors coming out. We passed frequently over the Patagonia ice fields. That's one of my favorites. Just yesterday, you see these glacial tongues coming down, and they're really, I mean, there's no bad view when you're looking out at the Earth from up here.
And this next question comes from Alexis. If you could bring one thing to space that you aren't allowed to bring, what would it be?
Oh, man, great question. I think for me, I would probably bring a stove and a fully stocked refrigerator. We eat pretty well up here. We have a really great food lab that takes care of our nutrition, and we have a lot of food. It's almost like camping food. It's a mix of dehydrated food and like preserved food, but you really miss like fresh cooked food. And I like to cook, so I really miss like cooking myself. You can kind of mix and match packets and feel like you're cooking, but yeah, so I think that's one thing I miss.
I think if I had to choose one thing that I wasn't allowed to bring to space, it would be my 3-year-old daughter.
And this is the last question we have for you. Our time is about to wrap up. How does being in space change your physiological function compared to being on Earth versus in space?
Well, as a physiologist, again, this is one that I'm really fascinated with. And we have decades of research now from our lifetime up here on the International Space Station. One of the big ones that really promotes a lot of change in the body is this upward shift of your body fluids. If you think about it on Earth, everything is being pulled down by this gravitational force. And that includes the blood in your body. It's being pulled down to your feet. So when we get up here as astronauts, you can see that some astronauts, some of it shows, in some individuals it shows more than others, but some people have puffier faces. I'm a big fan of it because it really got rid of my wrinkles. But you have this upward fluid shift where everything kind of shifts up. And your body adapts to that. You have a diuresis in the beginning of the mission where you expel some of that extra fluid because the sensors that sense the volume in your body are actually in the upper part of your body. So your body thinks, oh, I have too much fluid, and actually gets a little rid of some of it. We have higher carbon dioxide levels than we do here on the Earth since we have to scrub the atmosphere. We're not just in the open environment like when you're outside on Earth. And so having higher CO2 levels also causes some physiological changes. We've had some astronauts recently that have changes to their eyes, changes to their vision, and also even morphologically back to the structures in your eyes. And so we're studying all these different things to make sure that we keep astronauts healthy and safe. And a lot of these things have to do with that upward fluid shift. We also receive a little bit more radiation up here, so that's something that we measure and keep tabs on because, of course, that can cause problems for humans in space. The immune system in the body is actually dysregulated in space. We have a lot of data on that now, and that's one is really still kind of a mystery of the mechanism of why that happens. I can tell you overall I'm much happier and less stressed in space, I think, than I am on Earth, but somehow your immune system still has this real dysregulation from the physiological stress that it feels. So you have this whole host of changes, but fortunately, because we've done research for decades now, we actually know quite a bit about them, but we're still learning more and more on every day and on every mission.
Okay, we have time for one quick question. This is our final one. May wants to know, have either of you seen Project Hail Mary? And how do you view science fiction differently than normal people? I don't know if you can get movies up there in space.
We, in fact, have both seen it. We got it uploaded for us and got to watch it. I will say, I think we all still think of ourselves as normal people. We're normal people who are getting to do something pretty extraordinary thanks to working as part of an incredible team. So I enjoy watching it just like anybody. I think we have a little insider knowledge, and we can say, oh, man, I wish it was that easy to throw on a spacesuit and go out on a spacewalk. It takes maybe 8 or 10 more hours than they tend to show in the movies to get out the door. But, I still see it with the same fascination and wonder that I did before I had this job. And it's a lot of fun, and I think it's great.
Dr. Meir, Dr. Williams, thank you so much for your time today from Birch Aquarium. So many people looking on, smiles, applauding. We really appreciate you taking the time. What a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for the very interesting questions. We were so excited to be here with you today, and as you can see, I always have a little piece of Scripps with me here on the International Space Station, and you are always in my heart. So please give my hello and my love and hugs to everyone down on the ground in La Jolla and at Scripps and at UCSD. Take care, and thank you very much.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.